Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Course with Allison and Kristen. Today we are going to be doing a follow-up conversation on the process of healing. So I was listening to, what was it? I can't remember if it was a podcast episode or if I saw something on social media, but someone was talking about kind of an order of operations when it comes to healing. So I think, I guess to preface that, we can all agree that there's that healing is a multi-dimensional process for most people, meaning most of us aren't going to do one intervention or one process that's going to make us whole and solve all of our problems. So often you have to take a multifaceted approach, kind of mind, body, spirit. So this practitioner was talking about for her program, it's really important to start with foundational health or the basics of health, nutrition, lifestyle. So, eliminating too much caffeine or alcohol or stimulants, making sure you're eating a lot of whole foods, getting enough sleep every night, having a consistent sleep schedule so that your body clock, your circadian rhythm is in order, waking up in the morning and going outside and getting that first morning sunlight and putting your bare feet in the earth. So really focusing on nutrition and kind of settling, my understanding is settling the nervous system. And that's her starting place with everyone. And she talks about how, for a lot of people, if they don't have that foundation, then they're probably going to have a hard time. Some people are going to have a hard time holding emotions to process, past trauma or just really be with their experiences. So for her, that foundational nutrition and settling of the nervous system is growing one's capacity to then go deeper into healing. And I find this really interesting, and that's why I wanted to bring this into our conversation today, because there's so many wonderful modalities out there. There's so many incredible healers out there. And, I'm sure there are plenty of opinions on where to start. And there's so many different programs and approaches that start probably in different places. And so as I was listening to her, it made a lot of sense to me, this idea of foundational health, and that this would be a really important starting place. And once you've kind of mastered that, well, yeah, then you have this capacity to go into other areas and to go deeper. But then I also reflected on my own journey. And for me personally, that was not my starting place. My starting place was actually trauma processing, really going to the dark places internally and making sense of my painful experiences, being with my shame, and I tried a number of different therapies and modalities to process my trauma and move through those emotional experiences. And then from there, so that was kind of my foundation, I guess. And from there, going into really the subconscious rewiring process. That's where I had that had the most profound impact on me. So moving from processing my trauma and really witnessing and being with my painful experiences, and then tapping into the subconscious and helping myself to create new neural pathways and new possibilities. And that was hugely impactful. And so for me, well, and I should say that process actually settled my nervous system a lot. Moving through that just took a weight off, and I found myself having more capacity for life in general and for my relationships and yeah, all of life. And the nervous system and foundational health actually came later for me and was also really huge, hugely impactful, still is. And all of that is still a part of my ongoing journey. Yeah, but it just brings up this interesting question of okay, well, what do we tackle first when we're trying to come into wholeness and grow our capacity for joy and living in the present moment?
I think that's such a great question that you just ask of like where do we start? And that there are these programs or practitioners that really have this like step-by-step guide of like here you go first, second, third. And thank goodness for that, because I think a lot of these practitioners are helping people through these guided steps. And I think, as you also mentioned, that healing is such an individual journey. And what needs healing is so personal. And what needs healing first is also so personal. And I think that's where I find myself landing quite a bit, is just in this really personalized, curious journey. And I think that it makes so much sense to start in foundational health and get to clear out the weeds and anything that's kind of like muddling, as you said, like the capacity to then dive deeper into the trauma or what like emotional issues are needing to be tended to. But a thought that comes up for me is sometimes like the food is so intricately related with the trauma, or that's how the symptom is presenting itself through food. And so I don't think that's the best, that's not like a approach that might work for everyone. And so I think when you asked that question of like where to start, I think what came to me was you start with whatever is most present and most in need of support in that moment. So, like for you, maybe possibly you just had this need for processing whatever trauma was really present, and that was the first place where you needed to start. So following the symptoms, following whatever is really there. If somebody just, their nervous system is so dysregulated, they can't handle any information, then of course, really trying to integrate those practices that could support first nervous system regulation. So I don't believe that there's one place to start for every person. I do think that those steps can really work for some people, though. And
So when you
personally,
say, sorry, when you say, I want to go back to what you were saying about how food and nutrition, and then I'm kind of adding on lifestyle, can be a part of how we cope with trauma or unresolved emotions. And so starting there, trying to shift some of those coping strategies before we've dealt with the emotions, for some people could be really challenging. So that
yes,
lifestyle
absolutely.
nutrition aspect would not be a good starting place for them. They might have to go into the emotional processing or just some other avenue first before they could shift the nutrition and the foundational health. Is that what you were saying?
I think, yeah, it is. And I have personal experience with that when there was a time in my life and it came to exercise. And I knew that exercise was this step in my life that I really needed to reintegrate, that was going to have all these amazing benefits that I was searching for and really needing. And there was a lot of tension of like, I know what I need to do. I just need to go for the walk or go to the gym. And it was a really big battle because there was another part of me that was just simply like, no,
Mhm.
you're not just going to the gym. You're not just moving your body. And for me, I actually needed to go into that part that was saying no, that it, the part that it wasn't easy to just get up and do the thing, to go for the walk and really listen to what that thing and that part and that trauma was for me. And it was a number of things, but one thing was related to being in a freeze response. And so I did not feel safe. There was something within me that didn't have the safety to just get up and move. And I needed to come to understand that more and understand that tension within myself more before I was then able to move and listen, as we mentioned in our last episode, of like listening to that part in that story of that part for it to be able to integrate and tell its story, for that more wholeness and in greater understanding of the healing that was needed. So I couldn't simply just force through to create that movement. And for some people, it might be with food or cutting out caffeine, like these lifestyle things that we grab onto that are really a crutch or helping in some ways for a sense of safety or a sense of just keeping ourselves together the best that we can. So I would say that there are certainly times that doing the emotional processing or digging in a little deeper are more helpful and more essential than just simply starting with the physical.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really common thing that people experience. It's certainly something I hear a lot of people talk about is, well, they might frame it as struggling with motivation, right? I know I should get up and walk. I know I need to go to the gym or move my body in some way or fill in the blank, right? There's this thing that's supposed to help me, and I really want to be able to do that, but something prevents me from actually doing it. Something is blocking me from getting up or making the appointment or taking the step. And that really can be a signal that your body, well, one, your body is in some sort of freeze or shutdown state that needs attention. And we have to figure out how to break it down into a much smaller step, something that feels more doable to help your nervous system come out of that freeze state, start to kind of thaw a little bit, just expand that capacity to move toward what you want. And what you were speaking to is I need to look at this part of me. I need to look at whatever that thing is that's hiding beneath the surface that is not allowing me to do that thing, to take that step. There's some reason, probably a really good reason, that that doesn't feel safe for me. And I need to turn towards that. I need to look at that and ask questions and be curious and be with this part of me and kind of get permission, figure out what's needed to allow myself to take this step.
Yeah, as you said, sometimes and oftentimes it's a really, it has a really important story. It has a really important reason for holding on to or doing what it's doing. And I think it's oftentimes the things that are most frustrating. Like that experience for me was so frustrating because it, as I said, there was so much tension. And it's like the places that we don't want to go that often hold so much for us in reclaiming ourselves. And I've had a few experiences like that. And I know we touched on that last time too, of like, no, not there, not that way. Like, just go. Like, I need to go and walk, like, what's the problem with walking, you know? But they contain so much of us. And that reminds me of how you brought up earlier about that kind of step of going into those shadow pieces or reintegrating like parts of the unconscious. And it really, there's so much of us that we have access to that lives there, for, for better or, I was going to say for better or worse, but what I mean is like, we have these like wonderful qualities about ourselves that maybe we never knew, but also these parts that just need help to be understood.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. When I think about, I don't know, 10 years ago or whenever I was really just kind of waking up to the shame and I keep using the word, but trauma that I was carrying, I can remember feeling similarly about exercise. I really wanted to move my body. I wanted to be consistent. I saw people doing it all the time and, why is it so easy for them? And it was hard for me to get into a routine and to be consistent and to even have the energy for moving my body in a healthy, productive way. And it wasn't until I started moving through really processing my emotions and stuff from childhood, really uh, deep stuff from childhood that was painful and was where, I started having some shame and body image stuff originating from. That once I had moved through those things enough, I felt lighter. Suddenly, I felt like I had more energy, I had more capacity and motivation to move my body. It started to feel better, and I could access that so much more. So, yeah, I think we're really just touching on, well, one, that it looks different for everyone, where you're going to start. The starting place is different. There's no one size fits all. And it's really
Mm-hmm.
about meeting yourself where you're at and
Mm-hmm.
finding that window, what feels most doable for me right in this moment, what feels like a good step to start with. And we're speaking to the power of processing and healing what's underneath the emotional, psychological aspects that we're carrying and that you can't really see outwardly, but that are there. And
Mm-hmm.
we don't, for a lot of people, don't even realize the impact of those things. We don't even realize we're carrying them and that they're preventing us from accessing all of our energy and our vitality and our ability to make good choices and all of these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that just brings me back to that question of like, where do you start? And I think we start where we're having the most tension or resistance or challenge in our life, whether that's physically or emotionally or relationally. If there's like a pressing issue that's really wearing on you or something that you don't understand, I think that's an amazing entry point. And I think that also speaks to the question of like, how do you know if you need healing? And I think that exactly what I said, when we have these kind of ruptures in life, or we're not able to do the thing that we want to do or relate in the way that we want to relate, I think those really speak to that need for deeper listening and integration and healing.
Hmm. Yeah. So I loved what you said, and I wrote it down. The places we don't want to go hold so much for us in reclaiming ourselves.
Yes.
That is so profound and so true. And something, so when I often, I work with a lot of couples, so I think relationally all the time. And that's something I talk about with my couples all the time.
Mm,
When you notice
mm,
that internal resistance or that discomfort about doing something that, you're not in any danger, it's not a bad thing, but it's uncomfortable. There's some block there for you, or it feels scary. Lean into that. That is a signal. It can be, nothing is black and white. That can be a real signal that this is something you need, that this is actually an
mm,
area of growth for you. And if you can move towards that to whatever degree you can do, you're reclaiming a part of yourself. You're stepping into more wholeness. There's some growth there for you that
mm,
is when it's with a couple, the thing is usually a request from the partner, or something they're needing,
mm,
something that's really important to them. And often the other partner, that feels like the hardest thing for them to give. That's just often how we pair up. So
mhm,
the request feels incredibly intimidating or scary or uncomfortable. I don't know how to do that. That's not me. And um, it's fascinating to see how, if that person can step into the request or meet the need or move towards it
mm,
in some way with whatever that behavior is, that it's wonderful for the receiving partner, but it's also the real gift is in the giver because they are stepping into a new aspect of themselves. They're unlocking something within themselves and increasing
mm.
capacity. So I think that is so cool. Lean into the
I love
discomfort.
that. Lean into the discomfort. And I think what can happen with that around the discomfort is this fear of losing something or losing connection to self or losing a part of ourselves. Like, oh no, you don't understand. I don't go there because if I go there, then I get lost or I'm not going to be here with myself anymore. And what we're speaking to is like actually how much more you can have of yourself going into those places. And it's just such an interesting perspective, that fear of losing, but how much can actually be gained through that,
Mhm.
going in and leaning into this comfort, the discomfort. And I love just hearing about your experience with couples and how that can show up in the relationship as well, because of course individually maybe that might even feel a little bit more safe because you're not exposing yourself or leaving yourself vulnerable to someone else, and so perhaps even the reward is greater, and perhaps the fear is greater because perhaps these wounds happened in relationship to
Mhm.
begin with. And
Mhm.
so that feels really like a big risk to take.
Right. Right. So true. So it feels risky, not because it's actually dangerous, uh, right, or bad for me in some way, but because I learned that it wasn't safe to embody that or to be that or to do that, and because it resulted in something bad, pain or shame or rejection. And so, yeah, there's a lot of information there in our discomfort, finding those edges. And instead of instead of just believing the feeling that says this is not a good idea, instead of just believing that, actually questioning it and getting curious about where that comes from, that there can be a lot of healing around that in my experience. Where does this come from? Where did I learn that it wasn't okay to initiate physical touch, or it wasn't okay to whatever, fill in the blank, right? Put myself out there in this way, express myself in this way. Where did that come from? And when you can get to that
Mm-hmm.
origin story, which, 9 times out of 10, I would say it's in childhood somewhere, and then it gets reinforced throughout our experiences, throughout our life.
Mm-hmm.
When we can get to that, then we can actually pull it apart a little bit. I mean, one, we can be with it, we can be with our child self that experienced that or got that messaging. And that's where we can do the emotional processing and that healing work to go back to that experience and have compassion for ourselves and bring our adult perspective in and
Mm.
then allow ourselves, when we do that, we're increasing our capacity to step into the growth, whatever that is, expressing myself
Mm-hmm.
or reaching out or whatever the scary thing is. Then we can start to step into that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where we experience more of the wholeness. We take that scary risk of stepping into this new way of being or giving ourselves permission to embody something that was always there, but we hid or kept locked away. And we become more
Mm-hmm.
more authentic, more whole. Yeah, integrate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I just completely agree with what you shared. And there was a part there where you said, like, believing or listening to the feeling, but not just stopping there. I think we are hearing a lot more about like validating emotions, which is so essential and important. And there's more. Like, it's not just simply stopping at the belief or experience of the emotion. It's like, yeah, that's a real feeling. And that really came from somewhere. And that's information for me. And I want to know more. I want to know more about this feeling and where it came from. And as you said, 9 times out of 10, it's coming from childhood or, yeah, a difficult experience in those early years. And then getting that opportunity to differentiate of like, yes, this is a real feeling. There's something behind it. And I'm the adult here now.
Mhm.
And I'm listening, I'm understanding deeper, and I'm also an adult, and I'm able to listen and make new choices based on the information that I have. And so it's not the final step to listen to and act out from the emotion. It's
Mhm.
information and it's access to go deeper.
Mhm.
And and so I think that's just an important piece to bring in, that emotions hold information, but they're not necessarily the true reality of what's happening right now.
Right. Right. Absolutely. So we need that's a huge part of healing, in my opinion, is being with, is turning towards whatever, yeah, the stuck emotion is and whatever we connect it to, the painful experience. And as you said, validating, just being with it. And yeah, that makes sense. That was scary. That was painful, whatever it was. That was not what I needed in that moment. I needed something else. And staying there as long as you need, as long as this aspect of you needs, until that emotional experience is able to move through you and that energy can kind of loosen up. And
Mm-hmm.
then we can move into the next step of, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
bringing in our adult awareness,
Mm-hmm.
expanding the perspective a little bit, being able
Mm-hmm.
to distance ourselves from what happened just enough to zoom out and look at the current situation and discern, okay, is this exactly the same? Am I in danger here, or is this okay? And yeah, and just keep moving through that. So being with and validating as a really important step, but as you said, not the final step.
Yeah. And there was a couple times you mentioned the word discomfort and capacity as well. And I'm curious to talk about that a little bit more because I think that sometimes there's this idea that through healing, life just gets easier and we, don't have as many things to handle and we'll just, here I am before healing and then life is like blissful and easy after healing. And I think what we're speaking to so much here is building this muscle of tolerance for difficult feelings or going into challenging experiences and building resilience to come out of them, but also just handle life. And I think that through healing, we're expanding our tolerance and capacity to be able to handle all the different realities that we experience in life, such as, sickness, loss of loved ones, having a bad day. Like life is always going to life. There's going to be beautiful experiences and there's going to be challenging ones. And so building our capacity to be with challenging moments
And I
as
think the
well.
more, absolutely, and I think the more you can sit with your emotions, you can acknowledge them and have that self-compassion, the more capacity you have to tolerate discomfort. I think
Mm-hmm.
a really clear signal in my experience that you're having a trauma response or you're stuck in a trauma response or your nervous system is chronically dysregulated for whatever reason is this inability to tolerate discomfort and move with the flow of life to handle stress or grief or challenging situations and be able to move through them and come back to a place of balance. When we have unresolved emotions, we tend to be more rigid and inflexible. And, you see a lot of that kind of black and white thinking. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, being able to build tolerance for discomfort. In fact, I even heard somewhere a long time ago, had heard someone describe anxiety as the inability to tolerate discomfort. Any sign of
Mm-hmm.
discomfort feels like I'm gonna implode. I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna die. I cannot handle it. It's going to completely
Mm-hmm.
overwhelm my system. So through this process of healing, you're growing your capacity to just handle life, the challenges that
Mm-hmm.
naturally come.
Mm-hmm. And the feelings that come along with them. And through experience learning, oh, I can handle it. I did go through that tough thing. I did go into that uncomfortable place and I'm okay. And I tolerated that and I expanded myself. And so yeah, building that tolerance for discomfort. There was a time I had been in therapy for a while, and I think I was kind of in that like, oh, there's going to be a place where it's just everything gets easier. And of course, to some degree, it does because we've integrated experiences. And so maybe certain things aren't weighing on our everyday lives as much. But I remember having this moment of like, life just keeps happening. And I think what I need to do is just realize that life just keeps happening and just kind of expand myself to hold that even in my mind of, yeah, kids are home from school for a week sick when I had all these meetings planned, like all these unexpected things that it's like, yeah, life. And sure, I can feel stress or whatever, but there's not this resistance or rigidity. There's more flexibility to just allow life. And I mean, when we're talking about flexibility, that just reminds me of safety. Like
Mhm.
flexibility, safety go so hand in hand. And so that sense of safety with discomfort. Wow.
Mhm. Yeah, and your mind will always try to pull you into safety. That's the primary focus of your nervous system is safety, and safety in the sense of what is familiar, what is known. So
Hmm.
that's not always actually the safe thing, but to your brain, to your nervous system, familiar is safe. And so
Hmm.
that's where when something feels unknown or different, we tend to feel that internal resistance because that feels unsafe. It feels unsafe to do something that I've not done before, or I'm not used to doing, or I don't know what the outcome's going to be. We like predictability.
Hmm.
But if we come back to,
Yeah.
oh, you want to say something about that?
I guess the only thing that I was thinking is like when we're able to kind of learn that we can be safe in the discomfort or these kind of challenging life situations, then we're actually able to better discern what is actually safe and not safe versus most of life feeling unsafe, because there are unsafe situations or things to avoid as well. But it doesn't become this like just blanket everything, all the difficult conversations, all the difficult emotions, all the difficult relationships are unsafe. There can be more discernment
Yeah. Yeah,
to
that's a
see
great point.
what really is a threat.
Hmm. Yeah, so coming back to this question of what is the process? Is there a process or an order of operations when it comes to healing? So we talked about the nervous system a little bit. No, we talked about foundational health, meaning,
Mm-hmm.
well, that can include the nervous system for sure. Depends on who you're asking and what their definition is. But so there's this lifestyle aspect of, yeah, what am I putting in my body? What am I feeding
Mm-hmm.
myself? Am I drinking enough water? Are my cells being nourished? Am I getting enough sunlight and vitamin D? And um, how's my circadian rhythm? Am I getting enough rest? And all so just the biological function of our bodies. And that can be a really important component of healing because, well, as we know, what you put in your body impacts your mood and your energy and how you feel. And that impacts your reactivity and stress and all of these things, your ability to manage or to deal with life stressors and move
Mm-hmm.
through the world. So that is a really important piece that can be a really crucial piece of healing for
Mm-hmm.
most people. And then there's the mind piece, the emotional piece we've been talking about in terms of being able to be with your emotions. Often it means looking at the past, looking at my painful experiences, moving through some process of witnessing my own pain, processing my experiences, allowing them to move through me. And then we've talked about the other piece of this, which can be nervous system regulation and,
Mm-hmm.
recognizing how is our nervous system? Am I stuck in a freeze state? Am I chronically in flight? And is my nervous system really rigid and incapable of uh, handling stress and then coming back into balance? What is the capacity of my nervous system? And so when somebody is focusing on the nervous system part of healing, that can include, well, it can include so many things, but that's where you could start with breath work, just really tapping into your body
Mm-hmm.
and connecting to your body and your breath and using the breath as a tool to bring you into what we call a parasympathetic state, but really just into this calm, comfortable feeling of balance in our nervous system. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's so many ways you can layer onto that. But coming back to this idea that it's not going to be the same for everyone. So for somebody
Mm-hmm.
who has been disconnected from their body their whole life, their body has not been a safe place. They carry maybe a lot of trauma in their body. For some of those people, starting with breath is going to be really difficult and maybe feels unsafe. And um,
Mm-hmm.
maybe starting with diet is that's going to feel like a more accessible starting place. Looking at their food or
Mm-hmm.
lowering their
Mm-hmm.
caffeine intake. Or maybe they are gonna feel more comfortable looking at their emotions and revisiting memories from the past that were really formative for them.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, just coming back to this piece of where to begin and I guess reinforcing what you said really early on, which is that you start with where you're at and meet whatever it is that is needing your attention. Like, are my
Mm-hmm.
relationships really stressed? Or am I having a difficult time sitting down and playing with my kids?
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's so many different components and different signals that there's something in us that needs healing or whatever you want to call it. It needs attention. We're using the
Mm-hmm.
word healing. And so where's my entry point? What's right for me in this moment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I resonate with that. Where's my entry point? What's present and asking for my attention and in starting there and having that curiosity in that. And I think even using the word flexibility in where we start, like not having this rigidity around the steps to like, this is what we got to do first and this is what we got to do next. Although I don't want to like cast it out because in some cases it can be very, very helpful. But having this flexibility for each person and this curiosity for, yeah, each unique individual in history and goals of being.
Yeah, and this is,
I do resonate with that.
and so as you're talking, I was thinking about something I've noticed in myself, which I think is a really just part of being human, is when we receive information that we're not ready for, or we're not in the space to receive, we don't receive it. It just bounces right off, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
go in, it doesn't integrate. So, when I was in my really traumatized state, if someone started talking to me about I don't know, nutrition and how, the impact of caffeine on anxiety levels or, whatever it is, I don't think I would have heard it. And there have been
Mm,
plenty of times when we're constantly exposed to information and wonderful ideas. And there have been plenty of times in my own life when I came across something or, when somebody wanted to share something with me and I just was not in the space to take that in. It wasn't the right time.
mhm,
And so it stayed there, right? It just left. It did not enter my field of awareness. Um, and when I was ready for it later in life or after I've peeled back a certain number of other layers first, then I was ready for it. Then I could take it in. And it was like the first time.
mm,
And I
mhm,
think there's something really to that, to just meeting yourself where you are and finding your own entry point. And then there's also this building um, process of, okay, once I have this piece, so this, I can really wrap my head around this piece, or I really need to be with my emotions right now because something
mhm,
is happening in my relationships that is just not working. And then
mhm,
once I've moved through that and really focused on that step, well, now suddenly I'm kind of open. I'm feeling an opening to move towards looking at my nutrition or how much,
mhm,
caffeine I'm having or whatever, or getting more sunlight or
mhm,
starting to move a little bit. And it just
mhm,
continues you to build. One step builds on the other. And so it's just this ongoing process of healing. I don't
mhm,
really feel like there's an endpoint or again, an order that works for everybody.
mhm. Right. And as we're talking about like this order, it makes me think of, yeah, as you were saying, like, okay, maybe at some point you couldn't have heard about caffeine. That just would have been too much or overwhelming. But also understanding that all of these pieces do affect our health. And so, yes, maybe if we're starting with emotional processing, like that's not the only thing that affects our health. That we do have these foundational pieces and these pieces around the nervous system that are also really essential. That health is this really holistic view. And so, yeah, just not discounting these other things as well in the journey. And so, I guess when I'm saying like maybe there's no order, but there is like a full picture to wellness and health.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. Well, I hope this conversation was helpful. It certainly was helpful for me and really interesting to dialogue about and explore. Thanks so much, everyone,
Same.
and we'll see you on the next
Yeah.
one.
Thank you, everyone.